Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. I'm Charlotte Ravenscroft. I'm one of the consultants at Lucent. I'm going to introduce our fabulous speakers in just a moment. We know that you can't see each other in this format, so if you do want to introduce yourself, I think you can do that in the chat. If you can't do it right this second, we're going to try and enable that in a moment. And we're going to have a conversation for the first 20 minutes, and it would be great if you want to pick up any questions as we go through. If you put those in the Q&A box specifically, you click on the bottom where it says Q&A, it would be great to find out what your questions are, and we can get those lined up so we can ask our panelists as we get towards the end of their conversation. So first, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Catherine Rake.
Brilliant. It's fantastic to be here on this lovely sunny day. My name is Catherine Rake. I'm from Lucent Consultancy. We're a boutique consultancy. We work only with not-for-profit social purpose organisations on their strategies, their learning partnerships, collaborations. People often ask me for a shorthand of what we do, and I say we help organisations have a plan and do the plan. And the focus today is about how you move from having the plan to doing the plan. So it's fantastic to be here with one of our clients, Anna Bird from Contact, to talk about exactly that.
And Anna, fantastic to have you with us. We've enjoyed working with you over the last 18 months, roughly. Firstly on the strategy review and now into delivery. And we thought it would make for a fantastic webinar to pick up that. How do you take a strategy process and then turn it into a live reality in the months and years that follow? So we're really pleased to have you today. If you could kick us off in the conversation by telling us a bit about yourself and Contact and that process that you went through.
Yeah, very happy to. Thank you ever so much to Lucent for having me on this afternoon. So I'm, as you say, I'm Anna Bird, I'm Chief Exec of Contact. I've been in the post about 2 years. And as you say, we've kind of been running a sort of slightly extended strategy process, which has involved first the building of the strategy and then implementation of it over that period. So a bit of background about Contact. It's a UK-wide charity. We provide information and advice to families with disabled children, and we currently reach about 400,000 parents a year. We run the National Send helpline, so we provide advice on things like education, health care, social and welfare, and we provide a range of information and advice online, over the phone, in the community and in hospitals. And we're a huge champion of parents' voice. So some of what we do is about changing policy and practice. We support 153 parent carer forums up and down the country, and we also support parent-led campaigns for change nationally across all 4 nations. So that's a bit about what we do. Catherine, would you like me to just talk a little bit about strategy, or?
Yes, please, go for it, Anna.
Yeah, okay. So I guess the starting point was, so when I joined Contact, we were just at the end of our previous strategy, and so we built a new strategy, which is all about, like many strategies, is all about increasing our reach, and I guess shifting the tone a little bit of our work, so being more ambitious about the social change we want to see for families. And actually, that strategy wasn't really rocket science. We spoke to parents, spoke to partners, supported by Lucent, and I think the feedback we got was, keep doing what you do, but it would be great if we'd heard about you sooner, and it would be great if you could reach more parents. So I think the strategy change was all about reaching more people, turning up the dial, I guess, on our social change. But I think where we got to, once we'd signed and sealed the strategy, was that one interpretation of it was keep doing everything you're doing. And that made it really hard in terms of implementation of our strategy, because what we were really talking about was kind of culture change. How do you build more ambition? How do you do things slightly different to be focusing on impact and reach really ruthlessly? And so with a signed and sealed kind of strategy document, it felt like there was still quite a lot of the work to do to work out what the change actually looked like in practice and how to make it happen, how to kind of turn the organisation around or kind of shift our focus and do things differently, when actually the fundamentals were going to stay the same, the kinds of service we deliver, the kinds of campaigns we run.
Brilliant, really helpful to hear. And I know we've got a fantastic range of people, by the way, in the audience who all be at different stages in their strategy process. So I thought to help everybody frame all of that, we were actually going to share our kind of overall process and where this piece of work fitted within our overall process. So we were inspired by the British Design Council. It's a very well-established process called originally the Double Diamond process, which is about how you get from a starting point to think about, where you are as an organisation, to really get insight into where you are as an organisation, the discovery phase, to thinking about what it is that you uniquely can offer into the market, which is the value proposition, the focus phase that delivers the value proposition. And we took you through both of those phases, that first diamond, and then moved into the second diamond, which was about your options, the options that you had ahead before we supported you in your conversations with the board in terms of making a decision around the strategy framework. So far, so good. We've got to the point, this point here, where it says strategy and strategy framework. And I think one of the reasons we wanted to highlight the work that we did with you and this third diamond, and one of the reasons we developed this third diamond, is that process of taking the strategy into planning is often under indexed, if you like, so not thought about as much as, how do I actually get to a strategy process. One of the reasons that we put it in the diamond process, again, is rather like the other stages. You have to do a process of opening up and changing the ways of working, opening up to different ways of approaching it before you close down and actually decide your final business plan. So that's the process I think that we walk through with you in that last piece of the commission, which we're not quite through yet. It's still live, which is fantastic to talk about it because it's still live, where we said, okay, here's the plan, and we now need to transfer that. And I think your point about culture change is one of the reasons that we're really keen for organisations to go through that third stage, because the kind of ideas don't really make sense until it's hit the reality of the business plan. So it would be really helpful to hear a bit more, Anna, from you in terms of that kind of process and the sort of from to tool that you used at that stage.
Yeah, so I mean, exactly right. We got to the kind of the end of the second diamond, and I think there was a kind of sense of what next. And we spent quite a lot of time trying to describe what was going to look different. And that was really difficult internally because our services weren't immediately going to change. It wasn't, I have been in processes before where the strategy is about transforming something significant or exiting something or kind of really, buying into something, merger, etc. But we weren't in that place. So kind of there wasn't anything kind of really obvious to point to that would tell us that we had done our job and delivered the strategy. So we were trying to articulate to ourselves, the senior team, and I think the wider team, what change would look like. And you provided us with a really simple kind of matrix, kind of a sort of tool to help us kind of actually communicate that and work through it. So it was literally just a kind of from and to kind of slide, which I think you'll be able to see, to describe actually culturally, behaviourally, if you looked into contact, what was going to look different as a result of the strategy we were implementing. So you can see in there that, like many organisations, delivering kind of lots of service delivery kind of from kind of restricted funds, we got into a place where we were very short-termist. We had kind of short-term contracts. We were always thinking about just 1-year plans. We were quite funder-led in terms of what we were doing and quite siloed in terms of our internal working. And all of that was quite understandable based on kind of our funding portfolio and the way we'd kind of built and grown over time. But actually the shift we need to see, and you can see it in the slide, is about how do we start to take decisions based on kind of impact and a longer term view, How do we kind of become sort of, I guess, more challenging of ourselves and really ask ourselves what's going to make the biggest difference to parents, and kind of how can we kind of work together rather than just kind of in our silos. And so having it sort of laid out in a really simple format kind of helped us to articulate to ourselves what was going to be different.
Mm-hmm. And how are you using it, Anna, now? Because I know that you're continuing to. I mean, it was one of those slides that created a real moment, didn't it, in the organisation, a kind of real aha, and it'd be really useful to know why you think that was, and how you continue to use it. Because I know you're continuing to kind of refine it as you go.
Yeah, so I think using it with my senior team, the directors, I think it helped us all to be working on the same change and to really see
Mm,
what we were doing. It's kind of very galvanizing. Then I think we took it to the sort of heads of teams in our organization, and that felt much more challenging. Actually, there was kind of a sense of kind of this is a bit new and we're being asked to do something different, and it was the first time actually that strategy felt like a challenge to what they were used to. So we've kind of used it as a sort of jumping off point for some of the kind of leadership development work we want to do and that kind of thing. It's interesting because there was a piece in our From and To which was about shifting our organisation from a kind of very supportive, high support, cheerleading culture to one that has more challenge in it. So high
mm,
support still, but more challenge. And interestingly, as we've carried, there's other bits of work we're doing. So we're doing some work now about kind of becoming what we do next to continue our ambition to become an anti-racist organisation, where the same language of instilling challenge and sort of as well as support in the organisation is being reflected back. So it feels like that recognition of what needs to change has become
mm.
like, it's become the language of our organisation, and it's kind of being reflected in all sorts of pieces of work now.
And one of the reasons I particularly like it and like the way that you've used it internally in the organisation is it also takes the kind of big and sometimes quite scary goals, because sometimes it can be a bit of a moment when a strategy document's been finally written where you've got to go, oh my goodness, now we're actually going to deliver it. And we certainly have seen organisations become a bit overwhelmed at that stage. But I think one of the things that this helps with is ground it in some of your quite daily practice, because one of the things, and that's hence the third double diamond, one of the things that you can't do is say change on one hand but carry on using all the old tools to kind of to do, because you've got to kind of do the difference as well as say the difference, so you have to adapt your tools, and that certainly seemed to be the case in contact.
Yeah, and there was something, so in our organisation, we're absolutely passionate about delivering change for parents. And I think we live our value of kind of parents being at the centre of everything we do. And some of what the strategy requires of us is actually building better infrastructure, kind of redoing the way we do our finances and
Mm,
kind of, and actually to our frontline staff, we did face some challenge around, is that the right best use of our money? Kind of, should we be investing in infrastructure or should we be pushing it out to the front line? And I think that framework of showing if we want to deliver more for parents, we have to change this internal stuff. It just
mm,
helped people see the dotted line to kind of actually we will get to more reach, more
mm-hmm.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, and the connection between the two, and also the
Yeah.
fact that change doesn't come kind of overnight in some sort of flash of
Yeah.
flash
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
change. It's about the
Yeah. Yeah.
small daily practices and building
Exactly.
those and building
Exactly.
those anew, isn't it? And I think again, one of the power of the simplicity of the From To is it enables you to name some of those shifts in daily practice that
Yeah.
don't look revolutionary on the surface, but actually begin to allow you to do the new and be a different sort of organisation, more flexible, more agile.
Exactly. Yeah.
In the ways of working. And certainly, I mean, it seems as though the experience in contact is pretty kind of uniform across the sector, which is actually you had some quite heavy process for some of the things that you were wanting to do, and part the new was about lightening up that process and finding tools that are a bit more flexible, a bit more agile.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've built kind of sort of much more risk-based and less detailed kind of financial projections, slightly longer term, slightly more top line, but it's helped us to kind of look a bit further ahead. and to start kind of taking decisions on a different plane, I think.
Yeah.
Catherine, do you want to take us on to talk about some of those financial and investment tools?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that we wanted to share, and I think it's going to flash up on screen as well, was the work that we did for you around cases for investment. So you've talked already about the change and the need to invest in internal processes in order to actually be able to deliver that change. We started setting the team some homework, but in a tough love format. So definitely there was homework, but there was a requirement, first of all, for people to begin to, think in ink and write this down, and also to work in quite a limited time. So I think, if I remember, we sort of agreed 45 minutes only, to begin to do this. How did that work from your point of view in terms of actually beginning to fill in some of this stuff around cases for investment?
Yeah, so the context, just to kind of explain for people, is that we at Contact kind of had a small amount of kind of assets from the sale of a building, which we were able to invest in our new strategy. It's a very fortunate position to be in. So one of the big pieces of work that we needed to do in implementing the strategy was kind of work out what we would invest in, how much of the of our designated reserves we would invest, over how long, and what would be the return on that. And so, yeah, you set us this, and I sort of laugh about it because it gives me the heebie-jeebies even looking at this slide, Catherine, because it was a very simple framework. It set out all the questions we knew we needed to answer, but actually the reality of answering them and being challenged to answer them properly was quite tough for us. So I think that what we found was we had got into a place where we were using lots of shorthand for things without actually working out what we meant by it. So we talked about growing our reach, we talked about building infrastructure, we talked about kind of building unrestricted income. Each of us had a view on what that was, but that view was kind of different depending on which director you were talking to. And I think what you challenged us to do, Catherine, once we'd spent 45 minutes writing something down and it wasn't very good, was to actually open up some of kind of the shorthand and really talk about what we meant and challenge it and challenge each other. And we did get to a place where we got something a bit more concrete and, kind of grounded in reality, but it was hard work. It wasn't particularly big work. You gave us kind of quite short amounts of time to do it in, and that was quite important for us to learn that kind of it was big thinking but not huge amounts of time. But the questions were quite hard ones.
Yeah. So the love inside the tough, so you'd be really clear about the tough, but the love inside it was both about kind of keeping it contained, because some of this stuff, because it is hard work, is better done little and often than, the kind of towel over the head and you sit in a darkened room for 3 hours. So it was deliberately set up by that. But the other thing that felt like it really transformed the way you were thinking was then bringing those drafts and having a kind of collective responsibility, or that sort of conversation out loud, both where people were able to say, well, this is my understanding of the issue, but also to support each other and challenge each other in terms of the cases that individually had been written. And that kind of collective ownership felt like a really critical moment from my point of view, but I don't know how it felt kind of your end.
Well, I think when we started, we were going to have 3 or 4 different cases for investment and for small parcels of the money. And I think what we realised was that was a symptom of the silo working that we were kind of experiencing. So actually, we sort of, first of all, we realised that these things needed to be brought together. Yeah, but then I think there was what we did spend time kind of challenging each other and start to recognise that the work was in kind of owning these pieces of work collectively. So it wasn't, building our financial infrastructure was not just the domain of the Director of Finance. That was something we all had to do and be part of, and it had to deliver for every bit of the organisation. And I think you brought in some tools to help us. I think we got quite stuck because we were quite comfortable with asking each other questions and trying to sort of needle kind of what things meant, but not necessarily create together.
Yeah.
So you kind of, as I think, you facilitated those conversations to kind of get us past a sort of place where we were stuck.
Yeah. And I think that again, there was we used the De Bono 6 thinking hacks exercise, which is one of those that we use quite often with teams, because as you describe, we've all been trained, haven't we, to do the analysis and ask the challenging question, but actually teamwork is about building something together. And again, I think the rigor of moving through those thinking hats was about saying, okay, we're going to, we'll have 6 minutes on analysis, but then we need to move on. We need to make sure that that's balanced.
Yeah.
So we collectivize, again, a sense of risk, but also a sense of opportunity. And then I think the thing that was really joyous, actually, to me, was that there's a hat in that exercise which is about creativity, and suddenly there was a new conversation in the room, and it felt like people's shoulders dropped, and that there was a breath taken. And actually, I mean, both that you have an incredibly trusted team, so this worked really, really well. But actually, the invitation to say, how could we approach this issue with full creativity, felt like a moment.
Yeah, and I think lots of people on this call will really recognise kind of, it's really easy in an organisation that is chasing really scarce funds to not allow yourself to sort of think big or creatively. You do what you can do and to kind of think quite small. And there was something really special. It felt like we were being allowed to just think together and creatively in a different way. What if we did X, Y, and Z, and and there was just something really exciting about that process. So it was tough to kind of get through the first bit of the process, but there was something that opened up for us where we realized that we had the opportunity to think in a different way and together. And it was really lovely. It really, I think we all enjoyed that session very much.
And I also think in retrospect that there was something there which often happens actually in this stage, that the reason why it had been tough kind of surfaced. So, you have a team of super smart people. The people on the call all have teams of super smart people. But actually, sometimes these new areas of development have got a lot of a kind of decision tree embedded in them, but it's not necessarily always visible to everybody. And they've also got a lot of dependencies buried in them. And again, not always visible to everybody. So the opportunity to actually step back from all of that and say, okay, if we're going to move forward, what are the decisions and what is dependent on what? And that felt like a big kind of conversation for you as well, is that you realized that I think probably that there are many more dependencies than you'd, both between the different cases, but also in terms of any of those particular projects to get going, there were more dependencies than you'd clocked before. Would that be fair?
Yes, I think that's right. I think getting to a place, getting to a place where we could actually kind of grow our reach. So I mean, some of the stuff that's going to be quite familiar, I would have thought, to people on the call is, we want to grow our reach, but we can't afford to market ourselves because we don't have the capacity, the backup to actually deliver. So there's no point in thinking about what can we do with our brand and profile if actually it's going to drive calls to the helpline we can't answer. So how do we create an investment case that builds both sides of that picture? Kind of that was one of the big ones, and I think we enabled ourselves to kind of actually get to the bottom of that and unpick it a bit. So
and realize that the reason, and again, I'm sure this will resonate with people, that the reason you're stuck is not because you haven't got the skills, because actually you have the skills in bucket loads. It's because there just hasn't been that time to step back and have that space. And I guess, another of the team's reflections is that it feels as though the kind of headspace, headspace is more and more challenged. It feels like, in the kind of environment now, and with, awash with too much information, all the rest of it, that senior teams' headspace is super challenged. So making sure that that's being used in the appropriate way. So I know that the kind of stopping of some of the circularity of the questions, that sense of chasing your tail, has probably opened up headspace in other ways for you.
It has, and also I think the process you helped us kind of develop, which was much more bite-sized. So kind of actually I think before we saw these kind of pieces of work as kind of, I need 2 days, I need to clear my diary, I need to go away and I need to kind of, go in a dark room on my own. And it's probably going to be Saturday and Sunday, actually. I'm going to be on my own. I can't reach for anyone else at that point. But what we did was make it part of the work. So every week we had a small amount of time built into the calendar. So it never dropped off the radar. It was always part of the conversation. And we knew that we had the next session in. And, all of that allowed people to kind of see, our directors to see kind of it's part of the work. It's kind of, it's happening now. And it's not a huge amount of, it's not a huge amount of time, and we're doing it together, and you're never going to be sort of just grappling with it on a piece of paper on your own. So
yeah. And the last bit of that was about writing the business plan. So I mean, I have to say credit to you, because you took really seriously that on a page from to two, on a page the strategy, and on a page the business plan. But actually you broke our world record, Anna and the team. So tribute to the whole team actually on that, in that we managed to write a draft business plan, I think in 45 minutes, which I have to say was I think the world record on that. And obviously it wasn't the complete version. And again, the tool was very simple in the sense that we set out, a kind of quarter by quarter set of flip charts on the wall, and got everybody to do put their post-it notes in terms of what the kind of key milestones were, and what have you. But it felt like, again, that kind of simplicity and the rapidity of it meant that you were able to have a different conversation about dependencies, approach. Again, it just, it'd be really interesting to hear your side of that story.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all of us have kind of done that sort of, you put your flip charts up around the room. And I think what was different in that session, it was the speed, but I think it was also the challenge you brought, Catherine, because I mean, some of what was going on there was we had a big long list, a long list of things that were important to one of us, and the challenge we were invited to kind of bring to that was what matters to all of us, and kind of to prioritize based on kind of shared priority, to kind of really question ourselves about when things needed to happen, what was most important earliest on, kind of what the dependencies were again, kind of what the risk around things was. So that actually, not only did we have a business plan in 45 minutes, but we also had captured a huge amount of additional kind of rag rating information about how ready we were to move with some of these things. Like, it felt more than just a business plan on a page. It felt like a whole suite of information about kind of risk actually, and preparedness and capacity, and what else we might need to do with the structure of the team, all sorts of things. And I would just reflect as well that I think like part of it was for Contact, and I'm sure for other organizations, it can sometimes feel, we can sometimes get kind of tied up in knots about how to engage with the organization in some of these processes. So it becomes so big and so hard that you kind of never get around to it. You've got to get kind of all the heads of teams in a room, and you've got to kind of book the room, and it's really, it can be process wise quite tricky. I think what you enabled us to do was do a first go as directors, and to allow us to have that space, and then to take it to the team, but just, I guess, to just get something down and to start. And that was really helpful, and kind of actually, and so the work following the work that we did with you was about engagement and kind of testing, and that was great. And we needed the heads of, they brought some really useful challenge and change to what was in the draft plan. But we managed to do that next bit in a kind of a week and a half, and then it went off to board. So it all happened extremely fast. And I think if we tried to design that in the usual way, it'd have taken us months.
Yeah, and it's holding on to that, proportionality, isn't it? And doing what you need rather than, and I think often charities get caught in that trap of thinking that they need to produce something that's terribly engineered. But actually it's about fit for purpose, isn't it? And especially in a transition year, it's about having the lightest possible tools to take you through to that next step.
Yeah.
Really great to hear your thoughts on the journey, Anna. I want to bring in a couple of questions from the audience now, if I can. Just to pick up where we've got to so far, Najwa asks, how did you engage the rest of your organisation and team? Because we've been talking mainly about the work done at director level so far.
Yeah, so we had all sorts of points of engagement along the way. So we had kind of some time booked in. So we had a staff conference. We have kind of 6 weekly staff briefings. We have sort of every 2 months a kind of meeting with our heads. So we used those as opportunities to kind of bring others into the process. And we also, you know, through the strategy development process, we had kind of quite a complex kind of co-production plan that involved kind of steering groups and parents on it and that kind of thing. So it has been really important to engage and to bring staff along with not just the strategy but the plan to implement it. And there is quite a lot that was done to kind of bring staff along. I guess it wasn't the work that Lucent was involved in, it was kind of work either side, but it was really important.
Great, thank you. And then another question from Nadja was, how do you get that balance between you've set an ambitious strategy, but it's been a separate process trying to set up your financial plans and your budget and business plan for the year ahead. So how do you make sure that you retain the kind of ambition level as you go into that next stage?
Yeah. It did feel like our planning and budgeting process was kind of separate from the strategy process. And I think we had to take quite a pragmatic view. So I think we recognised that we weren't going to be able to change our plan and budget processes immediately. So we agreed that we would get the strategy signed off and we would get a 1-year plan and budget signed off using the current methodology. And then in year, we would do the work to start looking at, with a slightly longer time frame, to do the 3-year projections, to do the investment case work, and to give ourselves the time to think a bit more long term and to turn strategy into kind of longer term planning horizons. I think it's really difficult to find the capacity to do everything all at once. You can't do it. So for us, we just have to kind of, we had to give ourselves permission to kind of carry on with some things that weren't quite as we'd like. Yeah.
I mean, one thing I'd add to that is quite often, as you say, post the strategy moment, we work with organisations who do kind of a separate strategy for a big driver of change. So whether that's financial strategy or whether it's a digital strategy, but you know, having supporting strategies that sit between the kind of business plan and the overall strategic framework can be super helpful in that instance as well, because it enables you to talk about, actually, we've got, you know, 2 or 3 enormous enablers of change, and we need to be a bit more specific about how they're going to, you know, work to deliver that ultimate change. So I think that's really worked in other circumstances as well.
Great, thank you. Just want to encourage everyone, if you do have questions, do drop them in the Q&A right away. We'll be coming to Anna in a few minutes just for her top tips as well. So do stay with us, do keep asking questions. One I had for you, Anna, was I've been watching the news this week and seeing Send in the headlines. And I just wondered if you could speak a bit to how your kind of new strategy and business planning is kind of helping you respond to this changing context. Like, what does it equip you to do?
It has been a big week. I mean, I think first of all, the strategy set out an intention to be bolder. So we were really clear in our strategy that we were going to, so we want to end the battle that parents face in trying to access support for their children. And so it allows us to kind of respond to what's happening in the media with kind of confidence and to make space for that. I think the reality is there's kind of fights on all fronts at the moment. There's kind of disability benefits, there's Send reform, there's lots of stuff around child poverty happening as well, big piece on social care. So I think, I mean, I'm not sure we've got to the end of the conversation about how we prioritise amongst those kind of really important issues. But I think that we have allowed for that work to be seen as kind of quite central to what we do, and also to bring the whole organisation into that work, where I think before it was kind of the preserve of just kind of a couple of people in campaigns. I think that, you know, I suppose the other thing that might be interesting to someone on the call is, you know, that we have had conversations in the past about how bold to be, and as a deliverer of government contracts, kind of, can we speak out? So we had quite a lot of conversations during our strategy process about what it meant to be bolder and what risks we could take. And I think we have developed more clarity about where we're prepared to go as a result of kind of having the conversations, really, and just kind of spending more time on it. I think we probably had been quite cautious previously, and I think it's very easy to feel the need to be cautious. But you know, these reform programs are of kind of critical importance to the parents we support, so we can't afford to be silent, and nor, I think, would anyone expect us to be.
Can I, just to make one link back to, you know, what other you know, the organisations we're working with are experiencing. I think the other thing that happened through those first double diamonds in terms of the strategy process was a recognition that because of the huge and growing needs and the scale of your organisation, there was going to be an ongoing reality of saying no to stuff in the knowledge that actually that need wouldn't be fulfilled. And that's a really, really tough thing. So I suppose the flip side of being bold is also about being focused and kind of recognizing the emotional toll that can take internally, because of course, you know, you're motivated by doing the best things for families with SENS, and you've got loads of lived experience through the team and through the staff. So this feels very personal to a lot of people who work with you as well. But there is a really tough reality there, which again, it's faced by lots of organisations, that this isn't a prioritisation and somebody else is going to come along and pick up the pieces. This is prioritisation, and the reality will be, actually, you know, it doesn't get addressed, but being, you know, having I suppose the confidence to know that that's just a reality, it's not of your making. And that, you know, being bold requires you to be focused simultaneously. You know, feels like something we're picking up in all sorts of different places right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I have another question for you, Anna, from the chat, which was from Indy Cross. What was the key to bringing the team and the trustees along on the strategy and business development journey with you?
So for Contact, it is always about drawing the link back to how this is going to make a difference for parents. And I think we found that we needed the tools to be able to tell quite a complex story of how, as I said, kind of internal change actually means we're sustainable in the long run, so we can be there for parents and we can reach more families with our support. And it wasn't always obvious to people what that link was. We had to kind of join the dots and tell that story endlessly. But I guess it felt critical. So we always needed to make sure that we could clearly articulate that. And I think that was a job of work. Like, it really did take us a few goes to get it right. I think the other thing that was absolutely critical, particularly in the kind of previous bit, the sort of strategy development process, was how we engaged with parents along the way. How could we be sure that what we were designing was what parents wanted us to do? And that felt, so we invested really heavily in the discovery phase. As I said, we put together a kind of a panel of disabled people who walked with us through all of the decision making, and that felt kind of important as part of our kind of values driven process and made it meaningful.
I think I would just observe, having been on part of the journey with you as well, that it's when you get to the sequencing of things that it helps become live for trustees and some of the staff. Like, what are the critical steps and the critical interdependencies from, you want to reach more people. We know that's going to involve something around brand. We know that's going to involve something around expanding our call centres, as you said. but which order do you do those things in so that you don't raise expectations before you have the capacity to deliver them?
Yeah.
I think sequencing that out so people could see how that was going to scale up over time to achieve your ultimate kind of strategic vision of reaching more families is really helpful. It's actually, once you've got the plan, it's easier sometimes to buy into the vision.
Yeah, I think that's right. And the only other thing I'd say is that I think that Lucent kind of held us in the process really well. So part of particularly bringing trustees along with us, because I do think that they felt like it has been a long time coming and a kind of a long process, was to be reminded each step kind of where we were going and where we'd come from, and to kind of have a process that you kind of held us in and kind of steered us through. I think that was actually really important. Otherwise we could have got lost somewhere along the way, or yeah.
I mean, I think one of the other things, I've had a bit of a light bulb moment in the course of what you were just saying about kind of making the link back up to, you know, your ultimate, the people that you serve, the communities that you serve, and making that being the thing that really brought people in, because it occurs to me that that's one of the reasons that the simplicity works. Because if you've got that very simple, you know, strategy on a page, from and to on a page, business plan on a page, it's much easier for people to take that information and say, does this or does this not, you know, help us improve our impact on families. You know, I think, you know, another kind of credit to you and the team is that when it didn't quite work and people didn't quite get it, what you didn't do, and I'm sure there was a temptation, was squirrel away and write a 30-page document to, you know, really explain your point and another time in closely argued paragraph. So there was a moment of reflection, you know, that I think we had and you had with the team about, actually we need to do different rather than more. We're holding on to this idea of simplicity, and hence that different kind of tool that I think helped, you know, exactly as Shah was referencing, help make some of this real for people in terms of what the change was going to be. And you know, it feels to me, I hadn't thought of that before, but one of the, as I say, one of the powers of the simplicity is then, if you're dipping in and out as a trustee, or you're in one particular service as a staff member, you can really grasp it and say, actually, you know, I can stand by this because I can see the link.
Yes. Confession time, there is a 30-page document somewhere, but but interestingly, so I think at one point we did feel like we needed to kind of have more documentation. We needed to kind of get exactly that, squirrel away and kind of write it all down. And so a few of us kind of contributed to a kind of, you know, case for change type document, and all the evidence and we'd amassed over the strategy process did get sort of thrown in it. And then we just left it, because I guess once we knew that it existed, we didn't need to finalize it and make it a kind of, you know, it never became a board paper. It showed us that we had what we needed. We were doing everything for the right reasons. We had the rationale, but we continued to use those kind of one-page things for all of our communication. Yeah.
Very good. The secret 30-page document.
It's still got loads of track changes on it. Delightfully awful, and no one will ever know except the people on this call.
And speaking of the people on this call, Anna, we wanted to give you an opportunity as we're coming to the end of our Q&A to see if you had any top tips for other organizations that are thinking about how they turn, you know, how do they create strategy that sticks? How do they turn their strategy into the lived reality for their organizations going forward?
I mean, I don't feel massively wise on this subject, but I have obviously been through it. And so I came up with 3 things, but they're really small things. I don't know whether they will help. So I suppose my first thing is, for me, what I learned was to acknowledge my limits and to ask for help. So there was quite a big bit of me, once we'd been through the strategy process and we put money aside for the kind of strategy development bit, I wanted to be able to go it alone and kind of just take that and be a chief exec and like do the stuff you're supposed to do. But actually, I did realise that kind of, you know, as we've said on this call, like the change that was needed was cultural change. There was a whole load of actually really technical stuff about changing the way we did budgets and plans that I'd never done before, and I had to ask for help. So I I guess in retrospect, it was really obvious that I needed help. And I'm really glad that I reached for Lucent and kind of that we did work together on that sort of third diamond and this bit of the journey. And actually, I think it's the most valuable bit of work we've done together, because the stuff that we've grappled with together has been much harder, I think, than the sort of strategy process. So yeah, ask for help. Don't, I don't think I don't think we're programmed to know how to do these things. They're really complex, and in every organisation it's different. There's a different challenge. So ours was about culture change, but I'm sure it'll be different in every organisation. So that's one. Ask for help. So there was a phrase we kept coming back to, which was "this is the work." And I think that kind of reassured it. It was a mantra that we ended up using all the way through, when it became quite frustrating having to get back in the room together, or it was all about organising meetings and finding time, when it felt like we were having these big discussions and there was a lot of sort of delivery to do. And I think just kind of holding that sense of, no, this is the work that we're supposed to be doing as kind of as the leadership team, is to implement the strategy. This is the work. So sitting with not knowing, organising meetings, that is the job. So yeah, that was the mantra that we used, and happy to share that. And then I think the third top tip is just about kind of bite size is best. So we really learned a lot from, so Contact is an organisation full of parent carers who have people who have lived experience. It's full of I don't know, menopausal women. We're quite down to earth as a staff team. And it was quite countercultural to sort of adopt, we're not going to sort of grab for the sort of sprints and scrums type sort of approach. It doesn't feel very natural to us, but that's basically what we learned through the process, was the kind of sprinting through a piece of work to get to the end of it. And it was massively helpful for us. So small bits every week to keep the momentum up. That was what got us to where we needed to get us to board deadlines, get the document actually finalised. So bite size is best.
Absolutely lovely. Gems of wisdom there. So ask for help. This is the work, and bite size is best. Really lovely thoughts to end on. We want to thank everybody who's joined the webinar today for coming and joining us. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to hear your feedback about how you found the session today, and any questions you have about your own strategy and what you're thinking about doing next in your organisations. But I just want to close with a huge thanks to Anna for sharing her work so generously. I think the work of leading organisations through change, particularly in this always quite difficult context, is really hard, and it really helps to go through it together. And so a huge thank you, Anna, for everything that you've shared today. I'm sure a lot of people have taken a lot from it, including the final 3 tips. So a huge thanks.
Let me take this opportunity to say thank you to Lucent, because we have had so much of your support and been so grateful for everything you've taught us and helped us with. So thank you very much.
It has been entirely our pleasure. I speak for me and Catherine in saying that. Thanks, everybody. Stay in touch with us. Do sign up for our newsletter if you're not already following us, and follow us on LinkedIn, and stay in touch. And we'll be back with more webinars soon. Have a great rest of your day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.